And why should I not thank the Chinese? We need strong enemies to become strong. And China has taught us a lesson. You better take care of your defense. We do not have a reliable, we still don't have a good light machine gun, which is coming now. Don't you have to thank the Chinese? What does China fear most? May I tell you what it fears the most? Its own people, its own ideas. I want to thank whatever the present government is the political will displayed. In the past, there was no political will. Whatever China did, we succumbed.
Hello and welcome to my channel. This is Adi Achinth. Today I'm proud to present Lieutenant General PG Kamath, PVSM, AVSM, YSM and SM to come and discuss with us why should India today be thankful to the Chinese. The General, who was an alumni of the Sainik School, Bijapur, and of course the National Defence Academy, was commissioned into the Madras Regiment in 1973. He's commanded an infantry battalion on the line of control during the peak of the insurgent activity between 93 and 95 and commanded a brigade during the Operation Parakram. His repertoire of staff appointments were very many, but one most prestigious was the defense advisor to the Indian High Commissioner in Malaysia. He was the special rapporteur of the Human Rights Commission to 3 states in India, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, as well as Karnataka. At the time of his retirement, he was the commandant of the Army War College. Today, the General is a writer and a motivational speaker. Thank you, sir, for joining us this afternoon and discussing this very unique topic of how India should be thankful to the Chinese.
Actually, we are to be thankful to the Chinese right from the beginning. If you see in September 1947, when General Robert Lockhart went to Jawaharlal Nehru with a defense strategic plan, he was told we are non-aligned, we are non-violent people, we do not have any enemies. Police can look after our requirement, scrap the army or words to that effect. And next month, the Pakistanis invaded the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and the Indian army was launched into it only after the sovereign of the J&K signed his instrument of accession to India. So within a month of what Nehru said, the Indian armed forces were required. Just to tell you, at the time of the Second World War, Indian army, in the British Indian Army, was 2.5 million men. That is 25 lakhs, one of the strongest war machinery in the world. Of course, after the Second World War, you don't expect to keep 25 lakhs, I do understand. And at the time of independence, we had 400,000, means 4 lakh. In spite of it, after 47-48 operations, Jawaharlal Nehru gave the orders to make it into 200,000, 2 lakhs. Because army was not required. We are non-violent, we are non-aligned. We do not, in the rough and tumble of real geopolitics, we will survive as a non-aligned and peaceful nation. It didn't happen. And during 47 to 62, we were almost reduced by 50% to nearly 250,000 or something. And thereafter, not a weapon was bought. No modernization took place from 47 to 62. Can we beat it? And also, it was so ridiculous. There was only one defense equipment which was brought in 49. That was the jeeps. And even that, the first Congress or whatever Indian government scam took place when V.K. Krishnamenon was the Indian High Commissioner to Britain. And Jawaharlal Nehru was the Prime Minister. There was a scam. The first Jeep scandal took place in the first ever procurement of the defense requirements of this country. And thereafter, you know what the history is. History is replete with the scams after scams after scam. So in 1962, you saw an unprepared Indian army with no political will entering into a warfare, humiliation of a great country, which has fought so many wars, humiliation of a civilization took place, and no ruler or no even an elected representative would have any right to take the country into such a nadir. How did it happen? Because you have to thank the Chinese at that point of time, Adi. Why do you have to thank? Because that's why our 1965 and 71 we did better. Why should you not thank the Chinese for reminding us that you need a strategic vision for your country and you need to be militarily strong and economically solid in order to face the rough and tumble of the world real geopolitics? Now let us look at the GDP. The GDP from 47, the defense budget as a percentage of GDP, from 47 to 62, it was around 1.59%. Can you beat it? And in 62, prior to 62, 63 defense budget, it was 1.50%. After the Chinese invasion, it became 2.32% of the GDP. So only then we were opened up. Why did we wake up? Because you have to thank the Chinese. That they told you, please look after your country. Otherwise, and of course, it was a very, very costly learning. We lost 37,555 square kilometers of Atsai into China. And also humiliation, they had come down, and thank God they vacated those areas. They had come up to Balukpong and all in the northeast and went back to the McMahon line. So this is what we have to learn. And now, we have a country which has been 200 years of a slave country. When you have the freedom, you have to treasure your freedom. You cannot squander your freedom and your independence and your strategic autonomy to the goodwill of your neighbors. You see how it is. Okay, now what happened? Anyway, less said the better between after Congress, the UPA government till 2013. Now, what happened in the NDA-1 regime? 2000. I am referring to 2014 to 2019. Unfortunately, we were almost in the defense budget at the same level. Rather, we came down. Just see a country, a gigantic country with 1.3 billion people, with the disputed border in the north and a disputed border in the west, a disputed state, Jammu and Kashmir, a disputed Arunachal Pradesh, which is being claimed. In spite of this imbroglio, in unthinkable security imbroglio, still we surrendered the money in 14, 15, 15, 16 budget. Then we went down, 16, 17, 1.65%, 17, 18, 1.56%, till 1920, when the Chinese came into Ladakh, till the March 2000, we were 1.44% of the GDP. Now the Chinese invaded, or whatever you want to say, carried out their incursions in April 2020. Don't you have to thank the Chinese? Thereafter, you thought 2 to 3 decades there was no RT guns. 2 decades there were, even now, the rifles, LMGs, and Sten machine carbines are the basic weapons of a soldier for do the basic fighting from their trenches. Even this we are buying now in smaller quantities. We do not have a reliable, we still don't have a good light machine gun, which is coming now. Don't you have to thank the Chinese? Even your AK-203, which are Russians, we are trying to buy the technology and manufacture. Even that is still caught up in the pricing. The US rifles we are getting now in small quantities. It's a 1.3 million men army. You need actually 4, 5, 6, 7 years from the time you take a decision to see that it reaches the last mile, last soldier. Have you understood what you call the strategic, this one? 126 rifles had to be brought. Now we are buying only 36. What about the rest? two-front war against the Chinese and the Pakistanis. 83 light combat aircrafts have been ordered now. S-400 air defense missile system is yet to come. So if you really see, we were only doing a strategic appeasement of our neighbors, hostile neighbors, and that has not worked out. And China has taught us a lesson. You better take care of your defense. Have a national security strategy. Your national security strategy should have been done at the time of formation of the Indian Constitution in 1949. Because your country needs a security strategy to look after its defenses against a hostile neighbor, a nuclear Indian Ocean. We need it. But when do you give the orders for national security strategy? This should have been done at the time of the formation of the Indian Constitution in 1949, 2018. The present Prime Minister orders the National Security Advisor have a national security strategy. 3 wings are under him. Strategy Policy Group, yes. National Security Council, and Defense Planning Committee. Still, it is not out. It should be in 2 parts. First part for the country, for everyone to know. Second part is confidential. It is still not out. And why should I not thank the Chinese? We need strong enemies to become strong. Weak enemies will put us in slumber. You know, we should never forget the 250 years when this great country was under the British boots. Our youth have to understand that the price of freedom is not just being lackadaisical about it. The price of freedom is the patriotism is nurtured by blood. So Chinese have reminded, I am thankful to the Chinese.
Indeed, sir. Indeed, when you put it like that, actually, it just and the phrase that you mentioned that you need strong enemies to become a strong nation. I think that is a very, very interesting thing. And the Chinese are actually telling us that. Don't you think, sir, most of our focus has been towards Pakistan through the time, which has been relatively an easier enemy, if I may put it that way, to deal with the resources we had available, and nobody really put it. I mean, there were the names China, of course, the army and the air force used to train against them, but at a national level, we didn't think about China as an enemy.
Okay, let me tell you this. Very pertinent question, Adi, you have asked. In 1965, when we fought the war against Pakistan, rather Pakistan fought the war with their saber jets and Patton tanks which had come, showcasing Ayub Khan, Field Marshal Ayub Khan and all that stuff. And that was the time the Chinese were in full lead with the Pakistan. The two-front war actually, if a person should see, emanated from there. Chinese gave us ultimatums after ultimatums.
Yes.
They concentrated their troops in Tibet. They were threatening us. Rather, they threatened us to vacate the Dongkaila Ridge, that is the Nathula, and the Gelepla Pass on the Chumbi Valley. They told it is our territory, you vacate, otherwise we'll attack you. And the Indian political will succumbed, and orders were given for the 2 passes to be vacated. I want to repeat again, to be vacated. It was under two different divisions, I won't name. The southern division, the GOC got the orders and he vacated the Gelepla Pass. When this order was also coming to the Nathula Pass, General Sagat Singh was the GOC there. General Sagat Singh just went out of his headquarters and refused to take the orders and told his brigade major, his Div GSO-1, that he has gone to some post, I can't communicate with the GOC. So the authorized orders given in the 1965 to vacate Nathula was never vacated because General Sagat Singh, one of the most formidable commanders of the Indian Army, just left his headquarters and refused to get connected in order so that he doesn't take the orders. Nathula is still with us and Gelepla is gone to China. The moment we vacated Gelepla, Chinese came and occupied it. Do we realize the two-front war had emanated, threat had emanated during that time in 1965? And in 1965, you will be surprised, India agreed to the ceasefire even before Pakistan.
Yes.
Can you beat it? A winning country, not only in 1st January 1949, in 47, 48 operations, when a winning army was there, we went to the United Nations. Again in 1965, we did the same thing. And there was a Chinese threat. So there was a two-front war emanated. And do you know when the last orders were given for a two-front threat? 2018, Defense Minister Antony writes 1.5 letter that there is likely to be a two-front war and be prepared, or words to that effect. And that's nothing. That's all. He did not manifest in greater defense resources. So we realized that it was in 2008 itself the two-front war had actually manifested, and it was 65 and 2008 the orders were given. Okay, there was a strategic inertia with us. We will never be able to understand the strategic inertia which had seized our country at that point of time, just not able to come out of it. And further part, what else was your earlier question? Please repeat it.
So that's what our focus has been too much towards Pakistan and the that we had.
Thank you for telling. I got the chain of thoughts. So we were only concentrating on the West. You should thank the Chinese again. Why? First, there was a UPA raised at a mountain strike corps. Okay. Headquarters was raised, one division was given. It is now, due to the Chinese incursions, a second div has been given to the Mountain Strike Corps.
Correct.
And not only that, there was a reorientation, one of the strike corps of the western sector to the north, one which were in the plains, has been reoriented. Actually, it was required. Now, if you really see, there are two strike corps facing the Chinese, if there is a requirement. So that is not only what you call, there is a reorbiting which has taken place due to the Chinese. Otherwise, our fixation towards our western borders. And it was helping the Pakistan to be more relevant. See, China, India, the great nation is afraid of us and all. And we are concentrating. So there is a reorbiting, re-energizing of the Mountain Strike Corps, strategic movement of forces from aligned from the west towards the north. All this has taken place. Why? Thank the Chinese.
Yes. I agree with you in that sense. So now we've talked about the disadvantages that we've had over the years, and of course, it's a rut, and I guess it's a thought process which has been cultivated for 70 years. It will take some time to switch over to a new process, and which is happening. One can see that. Now, in spite of all the disadvantage that we had against the Chinese, and of course, just in sheer numbers, the Chinese are much larger, much more highly technologically savvy army. Where do you think we gained in the face of the Chinese in Ladakh this time?
Yeah, okay. Hardy, let's look at it this way. Terrain-wise, China is the biggest advantage. I want to tell you, just see, from the sea level, if you want to go up to the Kailash range, 17,000, from the sea level, if a crow flies, it's around 200, 250 kilometers, that's all, or less. Whereas for China, for next 1,500, it is already high altitude, 11,000 feet is the Tibetan average, 11,500 is the Tibetan average. The moment they come into Tibet in the northern or eastern extremity, they are already getting acclimatized. And the terrain thereafter is absolutely plain, the Tibetan plateau. Whereas you are climbing within 200 kilometers, This such a great vertical height, you can understand the gradient which we have to climb in order to come from the sea level. A person from the sea level, if he has to be effective on Kailash range, it will be 3 weeks to 1 month. Whereas once he is in the depth, even if he's in Lhasa, it is 11,000. It is already, he is acclimatized for the second stage. So he is there if he's in Rudok, within 6 hours, he will be there. 6 hours plus climbing time, about by 10 hours, he is on the Kailash range. You have to understand the terrain-wise, the disadvantage India faces due to our Brahmaputra and the Indo-Gangetic plain hugging the mountains, and thereafter the steep rise of the Himalayas formed by the clashes of the Gondwana-Therid continent. So the plateau which is formed on the other side is 1,500 kilometers of height. So he is already on those heights, and we have to acclimatize. So terrain-wise, he is already having a great advantage. Second, he has invested a lot in technology. His disruptive technology, which can really disrupt the entire war machine, the war fighting machine of another country, in terms of disrupting, even the Bombay blackout, which occurred, has been attributed to the Chinese cyber warfare. Yes. Yeah, our railway system can be disrupted. Our water management can be disrupted. Our electrical grid can be disrupted. Our banking can be disrupted. Our communications, our satellite communication probably can be disrupted. The drone warfare, very highly advanced drone. So he has a disruptive technology, which again we should be thankful in order to see that we have a strategic autonomy in the technology. Technology, science and technology is one of the instruments of warfare. The political power, the economic power, science and technological power, the diplomatic power, all this combined becomes the military power. So all this, there he has got an advantage. But where we will, I've been in the infantry for 40 years, man to man, with all the humility, but with the greatest of pride, I want to say our soldiers can withstand any hardship, any difficulties with their zeal, enthusiasm, patriotism, the unit spirit, the regimentation, the esprit de corps which we have, and the spirit of a soldier and the regimental spirit which makes him one of the most formidable human resource in this world. That's what we have. And man to man, we should never underestimate the enemy. Giving everything to the enemy, still we are better than him. At the tactical level, no one can stand. He cannot stand against us. Tactical level means company, battalion, even up to the brigade level, he cannot stand against us. However, I am slightly concerned now about the disruptive technology which he uses. He can release a swarm of drones on a height which will probably home on to each individual soldier and incapacitate. So those are the things which we have to see what counter we have to develop. Otherwise, man to man, tactically, I don't think we are one of the best. Secondly, what is our strength, which we have seldom displayed? I want to thank whatever the present government is, the political will displayed. In the past, there was no political will. Whatever China did, we succumbed. Whatever they want, we did. Otherwise, you just tell me, why there was no political will after our defeat our ministry in 1962? Our entire Ministry of External Affairs was only doing strategic appeasement of China in order to strategically manage him, in order to see geopolitically he doesn't get angry with us and we will not provoke him and be submissive to him and see that there is no cause for him to be provoked. That was what a humiliation for a country of our size and our civilization. Our depth, our pride, our valor, our history, our mythology, all this have been humbled only because we did not have the political will. Both in Dokulam and in this, we mirrored his deployment. He brought 30,000, we brought 30,000. He brought 40, we brought 40. He brought tanks, we brought tanks. We brought the mechanized infantry combat vehicles, we bought that. We built up our artillery, we built up our logistics, we built up our ammunition. We built up our entire logistic chains right from Jammu and Punjab, right by aero bridge and by the land. Our connectivity through Manali. All this has absolutely, with such a difficult disadvantage in terrain, we were able to do a mirror deployment for him, which in a much easier, which he never expected. So what is what we have learned to overcome is that the political will displayed, because you have to give it to the political master out here to having confidence in the armed forces, which the MEA still doesn't have, unfortunately. And we lived up to the aspirations and to the requirements of the political will by amassing the troops and formidable troops, where ammunition, logistics, everything built up, nose to nose, fire to fire, we are there. Bullet to bullet, bayonet to bayonet, we are there. So that is another thing which we displayed, military response to the political will. Second, we came out of the bilateralism trap. You know what is bilateralism trap? With India and Pakistan, we say we'll only have bilateral, because it shows in the Simla Agreement that in future everything will be bilateral. Our fellows mirrored the same bloody thing on China. Why China? There is no bilateral treaty. China is a world power. China is antagonized everyone, and still we try to follow in bilateral track. We will not name China. Who the hell? Why don't you name? He has come and carried out an invasion, and you still do not want, in the early part of Jaishankar's meeting in Quad and all, even when the Mike Pompeo was telling, please, China has done something in Himalayas, you say we are bilateral, we will not. We didn't even second it. So this bilateral trap we thought India, Pakistan, we will do with China is one of the things which China wants us to do. China wants a bilateral trap in negotiation with South China Sea, so it can show its power in negotiating with each country, Philippines separately, Vietnam separately, Malaysia separately, Taiwan, Brunei separately. And we are telling we want bilateral trap. It is a multilateral, whereas Chinese have concerned. Both are nuclear powers, and it is likely the entire world would be affected, and there is no bilateralism. We came out of the bilateral trap. These are the things which I think, and India also came to understand, and Chinese also were driven a lesson. Their script, what they scripted before starting their incursions, didn't go the way they want. Especially on the end of 29th, 30th August, the occupation of the mighty Kailash range. We can look into it not only by observation, electronic intelligence is right up his highway G219, GH219, his highway at Rudot, connecting Tibet and Xinjiang. That highway is also under electronic observation. What else you want? So that is what I feel that we have been able to gain.
So the Chinese have been doing this to us, and not just to us, I think to everybody around them for decades now. I mean, they've been doing it to the Japanese, they've been fingering with the Vietnamese, they've been doing it to Burmese. They have a dispute with pretty much everyone. As a matter of fact, they have a dispute with their own friends, which is Nepal. They also had a standoff with us in 2013, which was hushed up. I mean, we all know that. It was kept on the back burner. Oh, kuch nahi hai, it's okay. Now it has been cleverly put across with this current standoff, and it doesn't have any connection whatsoever. If you divide Ladakh into north and south, the northern part of the standoff is a very old standoff. It's not a new standoff. for some reason, everybody wants to jam all together and have, because this government has a political will, they have got a little bit of strength. The army is in a good position today. They want to push it across and stuff like that. Well, one thing we forget, and this is just an opinion, is the Chinese may not be ready to do that at the moment because they also want some leverage over you. They see you going up and they see you becoming more stronger. So they want to keep that one nerve pinched as long as they can. I mean, I would do it if I had some advantage over someone, I would keep it there. What do you say to a thought process that we need to throw them out and stuff like that, which is not going to happen? We know that for a fact. It's a disputed thing. They've kept it like this for a reason. What do you say to this whole? What's your opinion about this whole thing, sir?
See, firstly, the Depsan plains are very, very critical to the Chinese and very, very critical to the Indians.
Yes, sir.
Why it is critical to the Chinese? Because if you really go from the DBO side, the Arbutshore road, and go towards the Depsan, once you enter the Depsan plains, then it in matter of 4 to 5 hours, you are there on the national highway, which I told you, GS219, with the armor. So there is a corridor which is available to the armor. So Chinese are absolutely what you call very, very concerned and sensitive about the Depsan plains.
Yes.
And right from 2013-12, every time they have tried to stop our patrols from patrolling point number 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. These are the things where 19 kilometers we patrolled and came back. It was a buffer zone. Now, in this particular, right from patrolling point 9, they have prevented the ITBP was patrolling, incidentally. ITBP was not allowed to patrol right from patrolling point. That means, theoretically, though they have not occupied the plains and come till there, but they are ensuring that buffer zone is not available to you for patrolling.
Mm-hmm.
So that is 20 kilometers by around 50 or 60 or something, 700-800 square kilometers, if you really see technically how much we are not able to patrol now. Now, let us see from the Indian side. Anyone who comes into Depsan plain, he has got, we are straight away exposed to the DBO airfield, DBO post. North of it is Karakoram, and west of the DBO is the Siachen rearward. Siachen forward to the west is the Gilgit-Baltistan, and the Pakistan is on the other side. So it is actually a trapdoor where both the Chinese and the Pakistani offensive can come together, and it is very critical for us. And hence, we have, I won't say how much quantity, we have got adequate troops in the DBO, we have got adequate armor, everything is fortified. We do not want to give a loose flank of our Siachen eastern flank to the Chinese. And also Karakoram Pass, HSS, which is there with us, is also there through the DBO. So it is critical for both of us. Now, what has China done? Is come to this one, and like you, the foreign ministry, and most of us, though it is true, we should always link up DBO to the present one, that Depsan plains to the present situation. We should not treat it as a separate situation. The reason I'll tell you. If you treat it as separate, Dogra, you may go behind something, and Flinders, he has already gone, and you have vacated the Chushul Heights or the Kailash Range. But you will never say, you will never talk about Depsan because he has an advantage over there. His advantage we should have neutralized with our advantage by the occupation of Kailash Range. We should not treat it as our Ministry of Foreign Affairs always tell. That's an old problem, we'll sort it out later. Why an old problem? Your entire border is one contiguous border. There is nothing called as old and new problems now. So if I have to vacate the Kailash Heights, you should allow our patrolling up to the patrolling point 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Should have been our first instance. That is what I take. It is the MEA which started the concept of friction points. What is friction points? December 18th, you go and say we'll disengage from friction points. Who the hell is MEA to tell which are the friction points? I've only heard friction point in physics. What is friction point? Has the MEA defined which are the friction points? As far as China is concerned, the friction point is Kailash Range, the Fingers, Hotspur 15 or whatever, Gogra, Hot Spring and all. But Depsang is not the friction point because it's an old problem. Our thought process is in line with what the Chinese are telling us. We also say that is an old problem. Let's sort out here why. Why did you not link up the entire Ladakh front as one front and treat it as one front? Yes, it is out here. You are not allowing patrolling here. We will not vacate the Kailash Range. China was hell-bent in getting us removed from there because of our commanding observation into his depth areas. He has achieved. I have written an article about a month and a half back. Come what may, once you have vacated the Kailash Range, there won't be any move forward. I have written about it a month and a half back, and exactly the same has happened. Even on the 11th General's meeting on the April 9th, nothing has come out of it. Because I knew now they are not interested. Their only interest was to get you out. And after there will be some withdrawal, if possible, from Gogra and Hot Spring. That is PP15 and PP17 and 17 alpha. Might be, that too might be. I put a question mark. They will never talk about Depshan. And we'll never be able to really get back our patrolling rights till the time we capture something and tell them quid pro quo. That I will vacate, you do this. Actually, we had that advantage. We lost it out on this advantage in this particular situation.
Sir, as I'm just going to continue this entire thing, the Chinese have not stopped their aggressive nature in various different things. They've blamed us for us pushing our vaccines and trying to subvert them. They have blamed us for, as a matter of fact, they actually blamed us for making the Wuhan virus, which is the funniest thing that we saw. This whole thing needs to be countered with a narrative which comes out of India as well. Or as the army puts it across, the armed forces puts it across, psychological warfare. We saw some examples of it. We are seeing currently some examples of it, wherein we are talking to Taiwan pretty much openly. We saw the Tibetan national anthem being played in the Pangong Tso when they were playing Punjabi music. There are, few and far between incidents, and the Indian armed forces have always been very secretive about these things for very good reasons, sir. My question to you is, do you, in your analysis of the situation, see some part of the psychological warfare being launched by India against the Chinese in this particular phase of time that we are in today?
Actually, we should have done it long time back. I totally agree with you. But we do not have a national security strategy for different wings of the government to launch this. It's not only the army which launches. It's the information ministry which has to launch. It is the cyber warfare. We have to go into the Beidou site and do it.
Sure.
Isn't it? We have got a number of instruments by which we have to do. We have to have a proper public psychological warfare, NTRO and all have to do. It's a combined. When you don't have a combined strategy, I as a person, I will do that. It doesn't happen. The trade has to take place. Very nicely, we banned the Chinese applications. And we also restricted the Chinese loans, Chinese investment from critical sector. We have to take it forward with taking Taiwan up our sleeve. We should ensure that Tibetans are given arms, weapons, and equipment in order to launch an insurrection. We have got a common border from Karakoram into the Xinjiang. We should see arms and all dropped, and the Eastern Turkish Liberation Front, ETLF, should also be provided with funds. Go all out. When you go all out, open new fronts for China. So ensure that the Taiwan front, the Vietnamese, everyone, Japan, the East China Sea, the Senkaku Island dispute, the Philippines, the Whitsun Reef, where 200 marine militias have come there, the Australians, US, Everyone are there in one go. So there is a Eastern Pacific seaboard of China is enlivened. We should, from our western side, we should see that Tibet and Xinjiang, there is absolutely all moral, physical, every support should be given. Even Far East Russia, Vladivostok, Chinese have given a separate name to it, Heisen Y or something like that, and claiming a part of it. They are claiming the Pamir North, land of the Lost Mountains, the Pamir region of the Tajikistan, which is almost a third of the country. They are claiming it. They have written an article why Kazakhstan should not be a part of China and given an article, and the Kazakh fellows have summoned the Chinese ambassador to ask, is this your official version? So there is lot which India can do in order to engage China from a multiple direction, in a myriad of fields, which we should do. Our trade, why not give what you call quietly, China can give nuclear arms, weapons, and missiles to Pakistan. Why don't you give on the secret nuclear technology to Taiwan? Who has stopped you? See, we have to, when we go all out, what does Chanakya says? You have to, there is no, your enemy's neighbor is your friend. Give him on the slide. They gave the ring magnets there. They gave them the highly enriched uranium to the Pakistanis. We should also likewise do it. Once you know that we have got the political will to do it, he will come online. So there is a number of ways by which we can trap Chinese. Trap Chinese saying by just following what they did to us. So somehow, we have not been able to get our act together. What does China fear most? May I tell you what it fears the most? Its own people, its own ideas, its own democracy. Incite their people. Give them, means without telling, that is the freedom. You are living like dogs with food and with no freedom. Why can't you parade this narrative into their web, in their social fabric of their in their internets? So there are a number of ways by which we can do it. Somehow, we have been restrained. We have not come as a full country, channelizing our all resources in order to tackle an adversary who gives no quarters to us under any circumstance. So there is lot which India should do in terms of what you call trap China and engage China.
That's interesting. So I think this is my personal feeling. Enemy like that should be weakened from within. Fighting it from the outside is obviously, it's pointless. I think Chanakya has also said this, that the enemy can be beaten better when he's beaten in from the inside.
Yeah.
So I think India needs to find its ways to do that entire thing. So one last question. In your interaction, if you've had with the Chinese, what do you think that they, of course, their larger strategic goals are not discussed as openly as we are sitting together in one afternoon. We're talking about India's strategic goals. That kind of freedom is not given to anybody beyond the CPC. My question to you is, in your interaction with the Chinese generals, or whatever rank that you had interaction with them, do you see them at the same level as Indian leaders, as Indian leaders of arms in the armed forces?
See, my personal impression is, let us trace their history right from before. It's a revolutionary army, am I right? It is a part. The entire army is owned by the Chinese Communist Party and not by the Chinese nation.
Yes.
The People's Voluntary Force, which came into in the Korean War, all said and done, they did well. You can't tell. They just pushed out the Americans at one stage till the time the Incheon landings and they came back. So we should not treat them lightly. we should always give adequate respect to our adversaries. Give all the respect to the adversaries, see his strength, see his weaknesses, and tackle him. In what I personally feel is that the Communist Party ideology has bounded this entire armed forces into a party machine. Because it is a party machine, it has got its strength and weaknesses. The greatest strength is the ideology.
Of course.
The greatest weakness is the people. With a strong ideology, but I want to tell you in no uncertain terms, the soldiers at this point of time are not as good as our soldiers. At the tactical and what you call subunit level, what is the last war they fought in 1979 with the Vietnam? Afterwards, they have never fought a war. And there they came with the bruised ego and whatever. And actually, Deng Xiaoping was so annoyed with him. And after they came, he made one of the biggest exercise called as the North China, some exercise where the whole PLA was there in order to see what modernization is possible. It was a after effect of his disappointment of the Chinese People's Liberation Army's performance in the Vietnam War. So if you ask me, unless they use their disruptive technology to that level, and we are not able to anticipate in what way he is using his disruptive technology, and if we are able to handle his what you call our communication getting disrupted, and we are still able to handle with alternative communication. If we are able to foresee what he is going to do and have a counter to it technologically, I don't think their generalship can withstand the generalship of the Indian Army. I have got lot of respect for Indian Armed Forces, because they mean when a mission is there, mission becomes their God. So they go all out. Regarding individual Chinese generals, to say that they are not good or they are bad or something would not be in my correct perspective to attribute to them. So we should start on our starting point is they are good, we are good. That is the best way for an Indian Armed Forces to start. They are good, we are good. Now we'll prove ourselves better than them. Would be a better way than to undermine their capabilities and then have a false notions like the Pakistanis had, that 10 Muslims are equal, 10 Hindus are equal to 1 Muslim, and then start the war. So I do not want the Indian Army to start on that wicket. They are strong, we are strong, and we'll prove what we are. Would be a better message which we want to give to the armed forces.
I'm sure, sir. I'm sure the next generation of leaders in the armed forces are looking to grab that advantage in the other areas where the Chinese seem to have some sort of a play left in them in the northern portions of Ladakh. And I'm sure with all the knowledge being imparted to the leaders of today from the previous generations like yourself and everybody else, they're going to take a wonderful decision that all of us are going to be proud of, as usual, sir. Sir, this discussion has been, I think, one of the most real discussions. And I'd like to thank you for, sort of opening our eyes in certain things. It's always nice to hear from people who actually have the experience of serving in the armed forces. Because one thing, the reason I started this whole thing is to listen to people and try and understand very different perspectives. Because that is something we don't hear in those little boxes that we see in the TV. It's almost 30 seconds and there's some other guy shouting at you and stuff like that. And so the reason that I do this is so that people with experience of serving in the armed forces are given a platform and we all can gain from their knowledge. So I'd like to thank you for sharing this wonderful bit of knowledge from your end. And I'll be sure to get in touch with you with a whole nother topic and a whole nother time.
Thank you, Adi. I am honored.
Thank you, sir. Wish you a very good day and see you next time, sir.
Thank you. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind, sir.